My name is Jessica Harper, and at 33 years old, I always thought I was a good daughter. I spent my whole life trying to please my mother, Margaret, planning the perfect birthday dinner at her favorite restaurant in Seattle. When she raised her crystal glass for a toast, I expected gratitude. Instead, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "The best gift would be you leaving my life." What she didn't know was how completely I would take her words to heart. Before I tell you how I disappeared from my mother's life, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and subscribe. If you've ever had to cut ties with toxic family. To understand why those words shattered me that night, you need to know our history. My childhood memories are filled with my mother's disapproving glances and cutting remarks. Nothing I did was ever good enough. My artwork was messy, my grades were never perfect enough, and my clothes were never stylish enough. While other mothers hung crayon drawings on refrigerators with pride, mine would point out every flaw before tossing them in the trash. "Stand up straight, Jessica," she would say in public, yanking my shoulders back so hard it left red marks. "Smile more, but not like that. You look ridiculous." These constant corrections became the soundtrack of my childhood. My father was different. Dad was warm, encouraging, and quick to praise my efforts. "That's my bright girl," he would say, his eyes crinkling at the corners when I showed him my science fair project or a story I'd written. He was the buffer between Mom's cold criticism and my fragile self-esteem. But when I was 11, everything changed. Dad died suddenly of a heart attack. I found him collapsed in our backyard while Mom was at her weekly bridge club. I still remember screaming for help, the neighbor rushing over to perform CPR, the ambulance lights flashing against our house, and I remember my mother's first words to me at the hospital: "Why weren't you watching him more carefully? You knew his heart was weak." Those words planted themselves deep in my psyche. Somehow, in my mother's narrative, I became partially responsible for my father's death. It was the beginning of a guilt she would cultivate in me for decades. My teenage years became an endless quest for approval that never came. I joined every club, maintained a 4.0 GPA, became captain of the debate team, and editor of the school newspaper. Each achievement was met with comparisons. Jennifer's daughter got accepted to Yale, or Lisa's daughter has much better stage presence in her recital. Despite my mother's discouragement, I earned a full scholarship to the University of Washington. "You'll probably drop out after a semester," she said when I showed her the acceptance letter. "College is harder than you think." But I didn't drop out. I graduated summa cum laude with a double major in finance and economics. Mom didn't attend my graduation, claiming she had a migraine. My relationships suffered the most from her interference. At 21, I dated Ethan, a kind medical student whom my friends adored. When he came to dinner, Mom spent the evening subtly undermining me. "Jessica was always so awkward with boys," she told him over dessert. "I'm surprised she caught your attention." A week later, she called him privately to tell him about my emotional issues and how I needed more therapy before being ready for a serious relationship. He broke things off shortly after. This pattern repeated with Nathan at 24 and Lucas at 27. Each time, my mother found ways to sabotage whatever happiness I had found. "I'm just looking out for you," she would say. "You have terrible judgment in men." Despite it all, I built a successful career as a financial advisor. By 33, I was handling portfolios for high-net-worth clients and had been promoted to senior advisor at my firm. I purchased a beautiful condo in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood and had created a stable life for myself. And still, I supported my mother. After Dad died, she never worked, living off his life insurance and later his pension. When those funds dwindled, I began supplementing her income. I paid her property taxes, covered her utilities, and funded her extravagant lifestyle. Every Sunday, I would drive to her house in Bellevue, listen to her complain about her neighbors, her friends, and most often me. This year, for her 64th birthday, I planned something special. I reserved a private room at Canlis, her favorite restaurant. I invited her closest friends, arranged for a professional photographer, and ordered a custom cake from the bakery she had mentioned once in passing. For months, I had been working with a jeweler to restore my grandmother's sapphire bracelet, a family heirloom my mother had always coveted, but my grandmother had left to me. I decided it was time to give it to her, hoping this generous gesture would finally earn her approval. "This birthday will be different," I told my therapist the week before. "I think she'll finally see how much I care." My therapist gave me a concerned look but said nothing. Deep down, I knew I was setting myself up for disappointment, but hope is a stubborn thing. The evening of my mother's birthday, everything at Canlis was perfect. The private dining room gleamed with candlelight, reflecting off crystal and fine china. Centerpieces of white roses and hydrangeas, her favorite flowers, adorned the tables. The chef had prepared her favorite appetizers, and the bartender had stocked extra bottles of the Cabernet she preferred. I arrived an hour early to ensure everything was perfect. My heart raced with anticipation and anxiety as I straightened the place cards and adjusted the lighting. The restaurant manager assured me everything would be flawless. "Your mother must be very special," he said, smiling. "She is," I replied automatically, though my stomach tightened with unspoken complications. At 7 p.m. sharp, guests began arriving. My mother's friends greeted me warmly, many commenting on how wonderful it was that I had arranged such a lovely evening. "Your mother is so lucky to have you," said Helen, her oldest friend. I smiled politely, though inside, I wondered if my mother shared that sentiment. At 7:15, my mother arrived. She wore an expensive black dress I had purchased for her last Christmas, her silver hair perfectly styled. I moved to greet her with a hug, but she offered her cheek for a kiss instead. "The valet took forever," were her first words to me. "And this room is too dark. How will anyone see properly?" "I can ask them to adjust the lighting," I offered quickly. She sighed. "Never mind. It's fine." "Who selected these flowers?" "Hydrangeas make me sneeze." They had been her favorites for as long as I could remember. I had watched her plant them in our garden every spring throughout my childhood, but I said nothing, just signaled the waiter to bring her a glass of wine. The dinner proceeded with my mother holding court among her friends. She barely acknowledged my presence except to ask me to tell the waiter her steak was overcooked, though I could see it was perfectly medium rare as she had requested. After the main course, before dessert was served, I stood to present her gift. The small blue velvet box sat heavy in my hands as I approached her chair. "Mom," I said, my voice stronger than I felt, "I wanted to give you something special for your 64th birthday." I handed her the box. This was grandmother's bracelet. I had it restored, and the clasp replaced with white gold. The table fell silent as she opened the box. The sapphires caught the light, twinkling against the white gold settings. It was truly beautiful. And I had spent thousands having it professionally restored by one of Seattle's top jewelers. My mother looked at it for a long moment, then closed the box with a snap. "Your grandmother should have left this to me in the first place," she said flatly. "She always did favor you inappropriately." The table grew uncomfortably quiet. Helen, sitting beside my mother, touched her arm gently. "Margaret, it's a beautiful gift." My mother placed the box on the table without another word. My cheeks burned with humiliation as I returned to my seat. When the cake arrived, glowing with candles, everyone sang happy birthday. My mother smiled for the photographer, then stood to make a toast. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she said, her voice carrying across the now silent room. "It's nice to be surrounded by true friends on my birthday." She didn't look at me. As I get older, I find myself valuing authenticity more and more. She raised her glass higher and finally turned her gaze to me. What happened next plays in slow motion in my memory. "If I were to wish for a gift this year," she continued, her eyes cold, "the best gift would be for certain people to just leave my life entirely. No more pretense, no more obligation, just freedom from relationships that were never meant to be." The room went completely still. Her friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some looking down at their plates, others exchanging glances. There was no mistaking her meaning. "To another year," she finished, taking a sip of her wine, as if she hadn't just publicly rejected her only child. I sat frozen, unable to move or speak. The cake sat untouched before us as the photographer, sensing the tension, quietly packed up his equipment and left. For the remainder of the evening, my mother chatted with her friends as if nothing had happened. I moved through the motions of hosting, my body on autopilot while my mind replayed her words over and over. The drive to take her home was silent. When we arrived at her house, she gathered her things, including the bracelet box, which she hadn't opened again. "Dinner was adequate," she said as she opened the car door. "Next time, choose a better restaurant. Candless has gone downhill." I couldn't help myself. "Did you mean what you said about wanting me out of your life?" She paused, one foot on the curb. "Jessica, don't be so sensitive. I was making a general statement." "It didn't feel general, Mom. It felt very specific." She sighed heavily. "If you choose to take everything personally, that's your problem. But yes, our relationship has always been a burden. I did my duty raising you. I'm not obligated to pretend we have some special bond now. I pay your bills," I said quietly. "I maintain your house. I take you to every doctor's appointment. And you never let me forget it, do you?" She snapped. "You think your financial support buys you the right to be in my life?" That's your father in you, always keeping score." She slammed the car door and walked to her house without looking back. I sat in the driveway for nearly 20 minutes, tears streaming down my face, before I could compose myself enough to drive home. That night, lying in bed, I realized a fundamental truth. Nothing would ever change. No achievement, no gift, no sacrifice would ever be enough to make my mother love me. For 33 years, I had been running on a hamster wheel, exhausting myself for an impossible goal. As dawn broke, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, making lists and plans until the sun rose. By 6 a.m., I had a complete strategy for disappearing from my mother's life, not just emotionally, but practically and financially as well. First, I called my office and left a message for my boss, explaining I needed to take 2 weeks of emergency personal leave. I had accumulated months of unused vacation time over the years, always too busy caring for my mother to use it. Next, I contacted David Larson, a realtor I had helped purchase investment properties. "I need to sell my condo quickly and discreetly," I told him when he called back. "No public listings, no open houses. Find a private buyer willing to pay cash, even if it means taking slightly below market value." "Are you in some kind of trouble, Jessica?" he asked, concerned. "No trouble," I assured him, "just making necessary changes." By noon, I had an appointment with my financial advisor, Stephen Carter. I arrived at his office with a detailed list of accounts and assets. "I need to untangle my finances from my mother's," I explained. "Every account, every automatic payment, every financial connection." Stephen reviewed my documents with a professional eye. "This is extensive," he noted. "You're currently paying for her property taxes, utilities, credit card minimums, car insurance, and medical co-pays." "Yes, and I want it all stopped immediately." "May I ask why?" "This is quite sudden. It's time for both of us to live independently," I said simply. We spent 3 hours restructuring my financial life. I froze the joint checking account where I deposited money for her expenses. I canceled the automatic payments set up from my accounts to her creditors. I removed myself as an authorized user on her credit cards and her as the beneficiary on my life insurance policy and retirement accounts. "What about the mortgage on her house?" Stephen asked. "You've been making those payments for 5 years. Stop those too," I said firmly. "The house is in her name. The responsibility is hers." From there, I went to the post office to forward all my mail to a new P.O. box. I called every service provider we shared, from the home security company to the lawn care service, and removed my name and payment information. Using my knowledge as a financial advisor, I was meticulous. I left no loose ends, no forgotten automatic payments, no financial ties that could pull me back into orbit around her. Back at my condo, I packed only what I truly needed: clothes, important documents, irreplaceable photos, and a few sentimental items from my father. Everything else I decided could be sold with the condo or donated. As I packed, I realized how little I actually cared about my possessions. So many had been purchased to impress my mother or meet her expectations of what my life should look like. The expensive artwork I never particularly liked, the formal dining set I never used, the designer clothes that never felt comfortable, all could stay behind. That evening, I wrote my mother a letter. It took 7 drafts before I had something that expressed my feelings without anger or accusation. "Dear Mom, you said the best gift would be for me to leave your life. I'm giving you that gift. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. The financial support I've provided over the years has ended. The house, bills, and all expenses are now solely your responsibility. This isn't done out of anger, but acceptance. You're right that our relationship has been based on obligation rather than love. I release us both from that obligation. Do not try to find me. I don't wish to be found." Jessica sealed the letter in an envelope and drove to her house late that night. I slipped it under her door and walked away without looking back. That night, I checked into a hotel under a different name, paying cash. As I sat on the generic hotel bed, I felt a surreal mix of emotions, from searing grief to profound relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for my mother's happiness, comfort, or financial security. The weight that lifted from my shoulders was so immense, I actually gasped aloud in the empty room. Over the next week, my plan unfolded with mechanical precision. David found a cash buyer for my condo, accepting 15% below market value for a quick private sale. I opened new bank accounts at a different institution and transferred my assets. I deactivated my social media accounts and got a new phone number. I took only what fit in my car, driving east with no specific destination in mind. Each mile put physical distance between my old life and whatever would come next. I stopped checking my old email. I didn't answer calls from unknown numbers. I severed every tether to my former existence. The first week of freedom was disorienting. Habit had me reaching for my phone to check on my mother, to make sure she had taken her medication or to remind her of an upcoming appointment. I would catch myself planning Sunday visits that would never happen. At times, guilt would crash over me like a wave, leaving me breathless with doubt. But beneath the guilt and grief ran a current of something unfamiliar. Possibility. For the first time, my decisions affected only me. My time was entirely my own. My resources, substantial after years of professional success, were mine to direct as I chose. I had disappeared from my mother's life completely. What I didn't expect was how thoroughly I would disappear from my own former life as well. The Jessica who had existed in Seattle, the dutiful daughter constantly seeking approval, was gone too. Who would take her place remained to be seen. 1 week after I disappeared, my mother began trying to contact me. At first, her messages to my old email and voicemails to my disconnected number were irritated rather than concerned. Jessica, the lawn service says you canceled their contract. Call me immediately. The electric company claims the automatic payment was stopped. Fix this today. My prescriptions need refilling. Where are you? She didn't mention my letter. In her mind, I was still responsible for her life, regardless of what had happened or what I had clearly communicated. 10 days after I left, my former assistant Lauren emailed my new address, which I had provided only to her and my therapist. Your mother came to the office today, she wrote. She was very upset, demanding to know where you were. Security had to escort her out when she started yelling. Is everything okay? I thanked Lauren for letting me know but provided no details. The same day, Helen called my therapist's office, trying to get information about me. Bound by confidentiality, my therapist revealed nothing but did relay the message. During our next phone session, your mother appears to be escalating, Dr. Bennett said carefully. Helen said, she's been calling everyone you know, becoming increasingly frantic. 2 weeks in, my mother discovered her house payment was overdue. This revelation, according to Helen's message to my therapist, sent her into a tailspin. She hadn't made a mortgage payment in 5 years and had apparently forgotten the process entirely. Social media became her next battleground. Though I had deactivated my accounts, friends forwarded screenshots of her posts, which grew more dramatic by the day. My daughter has abandoned me without warning, she wrote. After all, I sacrificed for her. She has left her elderly mother without support or care. Please help me find her. The comments filled with sympathetic responses from people who knew only her version of events. A few who knew us both expressed skepticism but were quickly shouted down by her supporters. 3 weeks after my disappearance, my mother received notice that her joint account with me had been frozen. According to Helen, who continued updating my therapist, this was when reality truly began to set in. She went to the bank and made quite a scene, Helen reported. They explained the account was frozen and suggested she open a new one with her own funds. She said she had no funds, that Jessica handled all that. My mother had never bothered to understand her own financial situation. Despite having a modest pension from my father's job and Social Security income, she had always relied on my supplemental support to maintain her lifestyle. Without it, she faced a harsh reality. A month into my absence, my mother received notice that her credit card payments were past due. All 6 of her cards had been maxed out, and she had been making only minimum payments using my money. Now, she faced over $40,000 in credit card debt with no way to pay it. When David Larson placed a sold sign in front of my condo, my mother drove there in a panic, only to find new owners moving in. They had no information about me to share. 5 weeks after I left, my mother missed her second mortgage payment and received her first formal warning from the bank. This, coupled with her mounting credit card debt, caused her first health crisis. Helen found her collapsed in her kitchen, hyperventilating from an anxiety attack. At the hospital, her blood pressure was dangerously high, and the doctor prescribed medication for anxiety and hypertension. She kept asking for you, Helen told my therapist. It was the first time I saw her actually worried about you rather than what you could do for her. After 6 weeks, my mother left her first voicemail that wasn't demanding or accusing. Her voice sounded smaller, older. Jessica, I don't understand why you've done this. I need you to come home. I miss you. The last part sounded forced, unpracticed, as if expressing affection was a foreign language to her. 2 months after I left, my mother received foreclosure warnings. Her house, worth nearly $1 million in Bellevue's expensive market, had substantial equity, but she had no idea how to access it or manage a sale. Helen, despite being 79 herself, helped my mother meet with a financial advisor who explained her situation in stark terms. Sell the house, pay off the debt, and find a more affordable living situation, or face bankruptcy and foreclosure. Your mother finally broke down, Helen reported. She admitted that she drove you away. She showed me the letter you left. It was the first time I've seen her take responsibility for anything in the 40 years I've known her. 3 months after my disappearance, my mother wrote me a letter. Helen forwarded it to my therapist, who asked if I wanted to read it. I hesitated but eventually agreed. The letter was unlike anything I had ever received from my mother. Her usual perfect penmanship was shaky. The paper wrinkled as if it had been crumpled and smoothed out multiple times. Dear Jessica, I've spent these months angry at you for abandoning me. Yesterday, I found a photo album in the attic, pictures of you growing up that I'd forgotten about. Looking at your face in those photos, I saw something I never allowed myself to see before. How much you were hurting, even as a child, because of me. I wasn't a good mother to you. I was jealous of your relationship with your father. After he died, I blamed you because blaming myself was too painful. I resented you for being young and having opportunities I never had. None of this is an excuse. I'm not asking for money or help. The house is being sold next month. I'm moving to a senior apartment that I can afford on my pension and Social Security. I understand why you left. I would have left. I'm sorry. Mom. The letter contained no demands, no guilt trips, no manipulation. For the first time in my life, my mother had seen me as a separate person with valid feelings. A week later, Helen sent another update. My mother had joined a support group for parents estranged from their adult children. She was seeing a therapist weekly. She was learning to do things for herself that she had always relied on others to handle. On her next birthday, exactly 1 year after the dinner that changed everything, Helen sent a final message. Margaret celebrated quietly at home. She had a small cake that she bought herself. She told me it was the first birthday where she truly understood what she had lost. Not the financial support or the practical help, but you, just you. While my mother was confronting her new reality, I was building mine. After 2 weeks of driving across the country, I settled in Denver, Colorado. As far from Seattle as I could get while staying in the continental United States. The crisp air and towering mountains began to heal something in me. I found a modest apartment in the Highlands neighborhood with a view of the Rockies. Unlike my Seattle condo, I furnished this place entirely to my own taste. Simple, comfortable furniture in blues and greens that reminded me of the mountains and sky. No formal dining room, no guest room designed to impress visitors who never came. Just spaces that felt like home to me. Using my experience and credentials, I found a position at a boutique financial firm specializing in ethical investments. The company was smaller than my Seattle firm, the clients less wealthy, but the culture emphasized work-life balance and genuine service rather than prestige and profit. We value advisors who care about their clients as people, not just portfolios, the managing partner told me during my interview. I almost cried at the simple humanity of that statement. Finding a therapist was my next priority. Dr. Sullivan specialized in childhood trauma and toxic family dynamics, unlike my Seattle therapist, who had gently encouraged reconciliation over the years. Dr. Sullivan validated my decision to separate from my mother. Estrangement is sometimes the healthiest choice, she told me during our first session. Not every relationship can or should be saved. Those words gave me permission to stop feeling guilty about my choice, to stop second-guessing the decision that had allowed me to breathe freely for the first time in decades. Making friends proved more challenging than finding work or housing. In Seattle, most of my social connections had been through my mother or workplace. In Denver, I had to learn to form relationships based solely on common interests and genuine connection. I joined a hiking group, a book club, and a community garden. Slowly, I built a circle of friends who knew nothing about my past, who liked me for who I was rather than what I could provide. These relationships, uncomplicated by history or obligation, showed me what healthy connections felt like. The first holiday season alone was difficult. Thanksgiving came with a wave of grief so intense I spent the day in bed, looking at old photos of my father and crying for the family I never really had. Christmas brought anxiety dreams where I was frantically shopping for my mother, only to realize I had forgotten what she liked. But New Year's Eve marked a turning point. My new friend Emily invited me to a small gathering at her house. There I met Ryan, a high school English teacher with kind eyes and a quiet sense of humor. We talked for hours about books, hiking trails, and our favorite spots in Denver. When he asked for my number, I hesitated, old fears surfacing about letting someone close, but I gave it to him anyway. Small act of courage that felt enormous. Our first few dates were nothing like my Seattle relationships. There was no pressure to impress, no calculation about what my mother would think of him. We simply enjoyed each other's presence to adults choosing to spend time together. Meeting Ryan's family was an education in what healthy family dynamics looked like. His parents disagreed without contempt, expressed affection without strings, and showed interest in his life without trying to control it. The first time his mother hugged me goodbye, I stood stiff with surprise before awkwardly returning the embrace. "Your family is so normal," I told Ryan afterward. "It's kind of amazing." He laughed. "They have their quirks, but yeah, they're pretty great." 6 months into my new life, I had my first major breakthrough in therapy. Dr. Sullivan had asked me to write a letter to my younger self, the child who tried so hard to earn her mother's love. "Dear little Jessica, it was never your job to make mom happy. Her unhappiness lived inside her long before you were born. You didn't cause it, and you could never fix it. You were a good daughter. You were worthy of love exactly as you were." Reading those words aloud in Dr. Sullivan's office, I sobbed until my throat hurt. For the first time, I truly believed them. That same week, I received the letter from my mother, forwarded through my therapist. Reading her words, I felt a complicated mix of emotions, validation that my experience had been real, sorrow for the relationship we never had, and a strange, tentative hope that perhaps she was capable of change. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I brought the letter to Dr. Sullivan and spent several sessions processing what it meant and how, if at all, I wanted to respond. "There's no rush," Dr. Sullivan assured me. "Take all the time you need to decide what's best for you." The 7-month mark of my new life brought another milestone. I was promoted at work after bringing in several significant new clients. My approach to financial advising focused on understanding clients' values and goals rather than just maximizing returns had proven successful. "You have a gift for making people feel heard," my boss told me. It was perhaps the first professional compliment I had received that had nothing to do with numbers or performance metrics. Dating. Ryan continued to teach me about healthy relationships. When we disagreed, there was no silent treatment, no threats of abandonment, no keeping score of who was wrong. We simply talked it through, sometimes awkwardly, until we found understanding. When he told me he loved me for the first time, I panicked and pulled away for nearly a week. He gave me space but made it clear he was still there. When I finally explained my fears, he listened without judgment. "Love shouldn't be scary," he said simply. "It should feel like coming home." As the 1-year mark of my departure from Seattle approached, I received another update from Helen through my therapist. My mother had sold her house, paid off her debts, and moved to a senior living apartment. She was taking art classes and had joined a book club. The photo Helen attached showed my mother looking older but somehow softer, smiling tentatively at the camera while holding a watercolor she had painted. Looking at that photo, I made a decision I never thought I would make. I would return to Seattle not to stay, not to rescue, but to see for myself who my mother had become in my absence. After a year of building my new life in Denver, I flew back to Seattle with a mixture of dread and curiosity. Ryan offered to come with me, but this was a journey I needed to take alone. I didn't tell my mother I was coming. I wasn't ready for a planned reunion with its weight of expectations and potential disappointments. Instead, I booked a hotel downtown and spent the first day reacquainting myself with the city that had been my home for most of my life. Seattle felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, like a dream remembered upon waking. I walked through Pike Place Market, past my old office building, and by my former condo. These places that had once defined my daily existence now seemed to belong to someone else's life. On my second day, I visited Helen, the only person besides my therapist who knew I was in town. At 80, she remained sharp and insightful. "Your mother has changed," she told me over tea in her Fremont apartment. "Not completely, mind you. She still has her moments, but there's a humility to her now that I never thought I'd see." "Do you think I should see her?" I asked. Helen considered carefully before answering. "Only you can decide that, dear. But I'll say this. The woman who told you to leave her life isn't entirely the same woman who lives in that senior apartment now." I hadn't planned to see my mother that day, but as I left Helen's building, I found myself driving toward Bellevue automatically. My mother's new address was a modest apartment complex for seniors. Nothing like the stately colonial home she had lived in for decades. I parked across the street, intending just to see the building and leave. But as I sat in my rental car, I saw her walking toward the entrance, carrying a small grocery bag. She moved more slowly than I remembered, her posture less rigid. Without conscious decision, I got out of the car. We nearly collided at the coffee shop next door to her building. I had decided to get a coffee to calm my nerves before leaving, and there she was, in line ahead of me. She didn't recognize me at first. My appearance had changed: hair shorter, style more casual, expression more relaxed. It was only when the barista called out Jessica for my order that she turned, her eyes widening in shock. Jessica, her voice was barely a whisper. "Hello, Mom," I said. We stood frozen, the bustle of the coffee shop continuing around us. Finally, she spoke again. "Are you okay?" The question surprised me. In all our years together, she had rarely asked about my well-being with genuine concern. "I am," I said simply. "Are you?" She nodded, her eyes never leaving my face. Would you sit with me? Just for a few minutes?" I hesitated, then gestured to a small table by the window. We sat awkwardly. Two strangers who had once been mother and daughter. "I didn't know you were in Seattle," she said finally. "I didn't tell anyone except Helen." She nodded again, understanding. "You look well different, but well." "So do you," I replied, and meant it. There was a softness to her that hadn't existed before. The harsh lines of perpetual disapproval somewhat faded. After a few minutes of strained, small talk about the weather and the coffee shop, I suggested we walk to the park across the street, a public place. Neutral ground, but more private than the bustling cafe. We sat on a bench, leaving careful space between us. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then my mother did something I had never seen her do. She cried. Not the manipulative tears she had sometimes used to get her way, but silent, dignified tears that she tried to wipe away discreetly. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I never thought I'd see you again." "I never planned to come back," I admitted. She nodded. "I understand why. Eleanor mentioned you joined a support group." "Yes, parents estranged from adult children, they call it." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "At first, I went to learn how to get you back, but what I learned instead was why you left." She turned slightly to face me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "The other parents there, they all had stories about their ungrateful children who abandoned them for no reason. But as they talked, I began to see the patterns, the control, the criticism, the emotional manipulation. I recognized myself in their stories, and it was uncomfortable. I remained silent, hardly believing what I was hearing. My therapist, Dr. Evans, helped me understand something I never wanted to face. She took a deep breath. "I treated you the way my mother treated me." This was new information. My grandmother, who had died when I was 9, had always seemed like a saint in family stories. "Your grandmother," my mother nodded. "She was cruel. Nothing I did was ever good enough. She compared me constantly to my cousins, to neighbors' children. She told me I was the disappointment of her life." Her voice caught. "Sound familiar?" I felt a chill despite the warm spring day. "You never told me." "I never told anyone. I was ashamed, somehow, as if her treatment of me was my fault." She looked down at her hands. "When you were born, I swore I'd be different, but I didn't know how. I had no model for good mothering, only perfect images from magazines and television that I could never live up to." "That explains some things," I said carefully, "but it doesn't excuse them." "No," she agreed immediately, "it doesn't. Nothing excuses how I treated you, especially after your father died. I was jealous of your relationship with him. He knew how to love you in a way I didn't know how to love anyone." The frankness of this admission stunned me. My mother had never acknowledged my father's superior parenting, let alone admitted jealousy of our bond. "After he died, I blamed you because I couldn't bear to blame myself for not being there when he needed me. And then, over the years, it became a habit making you responsible for my happiness, my comfort, my everything." She wiped away another tear. "It was wrong, Jessica. All of it was wrong." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of decades of pain between us. "I brought something for you," she said finally, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a worn leather journal. "I've been writing this since you left. My therapist suggested it might help me understand my behavior and its impact on you." She held it out to me. "You don't have to read it, but if you ever want to understand, it's all there: my childhood, my marriage to your father, my failures as your mother, and my work to become someone different." I took the journal, feeling its weight in my hands. "Thank you," I said, not knowing if I would ever open it. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued. "I'm not even asking to be part of your life again. I just wanted you to know that I understand now why you had to leave, and that I'm truly sorry for making that necessary. As we parted that day, there was no tearful reconciliation, no promises of a restored relationship. Instead, there was something more valuable: truth. For the first time, we had spoken honestly about our shared past and the damage done. I live in Denver now, I told her as we stood to leave. I have a good life there. She smiled, a genuine smile without bitterness. I'm glad. That's what I should have wanted for you all along. I can't promise anything, I said carefully, but if you'd like, we could exchange emails. Just see how it goes. I'd like that very much, she replied, her voice steady but her eyes bright with unshed tears. We agreed to a limited correspondence, emails only for 3 months. No phone calls, no visits, just written words that could be considered carefully before being sent or read. As I watched her walk back to her apartment building, shoulders straight but without the rigid control I remembered, I felt something unexpected. Hope, not for the mother-daughter relationship I had always craved as a child, but for a new, more honest connection between two flawed adults who shared a painful history, but might possibly find a way forward. On the plane back to Denver, I held the journal but didn't open it. Some truths needed to be approached slowly, with care and support. I would share it with Dr. Sullivan first, then decide if and when I was ready to read my mother's unfiltered thoughts. Ryan met me at the airport, his calm presence a balm after the emotional turbulence of the trip. How did it go? He asked simply as we drove home. Honestly, I replied, nothing like I expected, and maybe, just maybe, better than I feared. 2 years have passed since I vanished from my mother's life. In that time, I've built something I never thought possible. A life defined by peace rather than constant anxiety, by genuine connection rather than obligation, by self-worth rather than desperate approval seeking. My career in Denver has flourished. I was made partner at the firm last year, specializing in helping women achieve financial independence after divorce or widowhood. The work feels meaningful in a way my Seattle position never did. Perhaps because I understand firsthand the power of financial security in creating freedom. Ryan proposed 6 months ago on a hiking trail overlooking the Rocky Mountains. Unlike my previous relationships, our connection has grown slowly and steadily, built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than desperation or convenience. When I said yes, it was with complete confidence rather than the nagging doubt that had accompanied major decisions in my past life. My relationship with my mother has evolved into something I never imagined possible. Our email correspondence gradually expanded to include occasional phone calls. Last Christmas, I invited her to visit Denver, and to my surprise, she came. Watching her interact with Ryan and his family was revelatory. She was quieter, more observant, less quick to judge or criticize. When Ryan's niece showed her a drawing, my mother admired it sincerely, without pointing out flaws or making comparisons. It was as if she was learning how to be a grandmother by watching Ryan's parents with their grandchildren. Your mother isn't what I expected from your stories, Ryan said after she returned to Seattle. She's not the same person, I replied, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. Neither am I. We're planning a small wedding for next spring. When I hesitantly asked if she would like to attend, my mother's response surprised me. I'd be honored, she wrote, but I'll understand if you change your mind. This day should be perfect for you, not stressful because of my presence. This consideration of my feelings, this willingness to step back if needed, was evidence of how far she had come. 2 years ago, she would have either demanded a central role or refused to attend out of spite. My mother continues her therapy and support group. She volunteers at a community garden and teaches art classes at her senior living facility. We'll never have the close mother-daughter bond that some of my friends enjoy with their mothers. Too much damage was done too early, and some wounds, while healed, leave permanent scars. But we have something different, something hard-won through separation, self-reflection, and deliberate change. We have an honest relationship between two adults who see each other clearly, with all our flaws and strengths. The journal she gave me sits on my bookshelf. I finally read it with Dr. Sullivan's support, 6 months after my Seattle visit. Its pages contained pain I had never imagined, insights I had never expected, and a perspective on our shared history that helped me understand, if not excuse, the dynamics that shaped our relationship. Looking back on my decision to disappear from my mother's life, I see now that it was necessary not just for my healing, but for hers as well. As long as I remained the dutiful daughter, absorbing her criticism and meeting her needs, neither of us could change. It was only in my absence that she was forced to confront her behavior and its consequences. Not everyone who reads this will understand my choice. Some will think me cruel for leaving an elderly parent without support. Others might question why I ever allowed contact to resume, but I've learned that healing rarely follows a straight or simple path. Sometimes, the kindest thing we can do for ourselves and others is to disappear until we're seen for our true worth. Sometimes, the people who hurt us most deeply can change, given enough time and motivation. And sometimes, the family we create through choice can teach us how to heal the wounds inflicted by the family we were born into. Ryan and I are building a life based on mutual respect, open communication, and genuine affection. His family has welcomed me with a warmth I never knew was possible. My circle of friends continues to grow, each relationship teaching me something new about healthy connection. As for my mother and me, we proceed carefully, each interaction a small test of our new boundaries and understanding. There are still difficult moments, old patterns that try to reassert themselves, but now we have tools to recognize and redirect these tendencies before they cause new damage. At her most recent birthday dinner, a quiet affair at a restaurant near her apartment, she raised her glass in a toast very different from the one that changed our lives 2 years ago. 2 second chances, she said simply. And to the daughter who was brave enough to leave so that both of us could find better versions of ourselves. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give yourself and others is the courage to vanish until they see your true worth. Have you ever had to create distance from someone you love in order to heal? Comment below and let me know if this story resonated with you. Please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. And remember, it's never too late to create boundaries that protect your peace.